Hello, lovely people. How are you doing? How are you riding the waves? How's your surfing going? I'm definitely riding them over here. So, as always, these are always off the cuff and just tuning in and feeling into what wants to be spoken to. I had a note in my notes on my phone the other day where I wrote down how to move from your lower self to your higher self and what is the role of emotions along the way. So I might begin with that and see where that takes us. But really, what I'm tuning into right now is this whole transitional period, this whole reconstruction and renovation that we're going through as a collective. And I would assume most of us individually, because everyone that I know in my life is going through something. There's no doubt about that. So, really, what this time is about is really, truly, truly, truly coming back to who we are. We've been in a sleep state for thousands of years, and it's the remembering, it's the realigning, it's the reawakening, right? It's not the first awakening, it's the reawakening. And so this is why whatever we're speaking about, there's the reascension, realignment, rebalancing, reawakening, remembering. This is what we're going through right now. It's nothing new. It's the coming back to our original state, our original template, if you will, and kind of making what has been inverted and distorted and upside down, making it all right again. And one thing that I just want to drop in off the bat is that nobody's coming to do this for us, because that's been part of the distorted paradigm that we've been in, is this kind of authority over, and whether that's religious or political or any otherwise, this is really coming back to our sovereignty on every level: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. So these times are going to beckon us, sometimes gently and sometimes pretty harshly. Like, it can feel pretty rude sometimes. It's beckoning us to, like, come back to ourselves. How do we feel? How do we intuit? What is our knowing, wisdom, intuition, feeling, perspective? God, dare I say, opinion. That one gets a little bit sticky out there, right? But we're coming back to how to trust ourselves. So I'm continuing the thread of what I've already shared in the past, but I really want to look at how do we return home to our higher self in this incarnate form. So how to move from the lower self to the higher self, the role of emotions. I also want to talk about ego, because there's a lot of misconception around ego. I've done an episode on it before, but I want to continue the thread here and act as a reminder. And let's see where the rest takes us, as always. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. I was listening to Darius Wright in a live interview, and I've mentioned his name before. He does these controlled out-of-body experience training, basically. And, like anything, some things are your cup of tea and some things are not. I always say take things with a pinch of salt. Listen to your own intuition and your gut and your heart. But there are some things that he was saying that were like, your mind might not grasp it, but your soul knows. Your soul knows everything. Like, we have to really, this is part of the remembering. And when we remember, it's because our soul already knows. It already knows. It has all the information that it needs. And everything that we really truly need is here. But, as he was explaining, it's like we cannot, with just 5 senses, and yes, we kind of have a 6th sense, but it's a bit dormant right now. We cannot perceive the full spectrum of light. And so therefore we cannot perceive all frequencies. And so within that, we are living in a very limited reality. So to bring that into kind of a much more practical way, if that sounds a bit too esoteric, where, how would I describe it actually? This is a tricky one. It's like when you haven't, this is going to seem like a really funny analogy, but it's coming into my mind. Like, as an adult, when you were a kid or a teenager, you could do things and you had this kind of invincibility, right? You didn't have the same level of fear. Your body worked pretty damn well, right? And so, you could do stuff on a bike or like rollerblades or roller skates or jumping off cliffs, I don't know. We used to do all sorts of stuff and there wasn't fear. And we had the physicality to do it, and we had the curiosity and the spontaneity and the adventure and the sense of like, I can do it, right? And then you get older and you get, a little bit more crickety and you're afraid of getting injured and you're a little bit more jaded and you're a bit more cautious, and these things come in, right? And so you lose some of those abilities. But the thing is, those abilities are still within us. It's just kind of how we mentally perceive them. And yes, our bodies are maybe not quite as agile, but I also think there's a huge mental component to that because, you see some people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they're still doing some like pretty phenomenal things, right? Depending on what culture and what kind of medium you're looking at. So really anything is possible. So the analogy is like, what if you haven't ridden a bike since you were like 12 years old? And you're like, I can't really do it, or I can't do it really well. But once you start doing it, you recognize like your muscle memory and your cellular memory remembers. And you can do it. It's just mentally getting yourself back up on board and getting into alignment and knowing like, yeah, maybe it's going to be a bit different because you're not a 12-year-old anymore, right? But you can still do it. And so this might be a really poor analogy, but I'm using it just to say that it's like we have all of these abilities. We have all of this knowing within us. And part of this reawakening, reascension, and coming back into our higher selves. Now, I'm a little bit dubious of using those terms because it sounds judgmental or hierarchical, but I'm just using it because they're terms that we can relate to. But part of this, like connecting more to our higher self, it's not to say that the lower self is bad, but it's just to say that the lower self has been in a sleep state for a very long time. And connecting to our higher self is what's going to make us remember who we truly are, our true template, and we're not these physical bodies. We are an infinite immortal soul. Now, one thing that, Darius talks to a lot, and I really have to agree, is that there's been, I think, this big misconception of spirituality that when we leave the body, that we're just like this orb of light, right? And we have no form and we have no personality. We have no ego. We're just completely unified with the one of everything. And even though, from even what would be recounted by those who have had near-death experiences, even though they absolutely feel that unification, that oneness, that unconditional love, that they are a part of Source and that they are held within the fabric of Source, they still come out of their body. And at first they don't recognize that they're out of their body because they still feel like them. They still have their consciousness. They still have their personality. They might not feel the duality anymore. They might not have the same judgment or opinion anymore, but they absolutely still feel like themselves. So it's of Darius's opinion, and I have to say I agree with it. Well, it's not even his opinion. It's his experience in the out-of-body state. That, this spiritual new age rhetoric that says, don't have an ego, don't have a personality, you're just a blob of light. Yes, you are light, that's absolutely true, but you are not without a sense of self. You do have a sense of self, not just in human form, but also in soul form. And so he kind of is calling bullshit on it, and I have to agree with it because he said something that I thought was interesting. It's like, well, if you try and get rid of the ego, you're kind of you're trying to delete your soul history. And how like if you, as an adult, if you were to try and erase all of the experiences that you've had since your childhood up until this point, Like if you were to try to quote unquote get rid of it, which is not my belief in any shape or form, and it's not what I would encourage either, because I believe that who you are today is the makeup of all the experiences that you've had, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? If you were to erase all of those memories, who would you be today? Who would you be if you didn't have the experience of suffering that taught you resilience, pain that taught you compassion, struggle that taught you empathy, loss that taught you gratitude? Whatever it is that we go through, there's always a learning. There's always growth. So who would you be if you hadn't had those experiences? Now, I'm with you to say like, well, shit, I don't always want to have to grow through suffering, right? It doesn't have to always be struggle. But to delete and erase our experiences because we don't like them or we deem them as something bad, I mean, that's all judgment, right? That's coming from fear and it's coming from judgment. And it's taking away this kind of, from a higher perspective, this precious experience of being human. I know it ain't fun. A lot of the time, it's really not. But it is a precious experience and it is teaching us something, and we're learning and evolving and growing through it. And that's what interests the soul as we come here and we have this rich, textured, complicated sometimes experience, but is really exciting to the soul because it's something to move through and evolve out of, right? And if we were to strip that all away, then what would there be? It would be vanilla. It would be boring. It would be monotonous. It would be two-dimensional. So this kind of, spirituality that says get rid of your ego, he was saying it's like trying to erase your soul's memory of all the experiences that you've had from lifetimes. And what it does is it kind of puts you into this childlike state, like you go back to being this spiritual child, and it's much easier to control you in that state. And I thought, ooh, that's interesting. So you can take or leave it as, that resonates or may not resonate with you, but it's an interesting point of contemplation. So at the very least, I agree from the perspective of don't get rid of anything. Embrace it, you can alchemize it, you can use it, but everything is grist for the mill. Everything. You don't want to erase your history. So this whole idea of get rid of your ego, firstly, you can't be human without an ego. But I also think this sense of self, I'm not just speaking about it from a human personality, ego perspective. The sense of self, when I work with individuals, I will connect them to the essence of who they are, which is their sense of self in their soul self. And that is a certain flavor, character, essence, energy, whatever you want to call it. It has your unique fingerprint signature on it that no other being has. Each one of us has our own unique fingerprint, both physically in human form and in our soul form. It doesn't mean that we're separate and disconnected. That's an illusion. But every soul, just like every drop of water, every snowflake has its own imprint. And, not but and, it is part of the ocean, of existence, of consciousness, of love, of light, of source, of God, of divinity, of creation, whatever you want to call it. It's all from the same source, but with its own beautiful and unique imprint, its own beautiful, unique signature, right? So what we're coming back to is that original template, that signature that is yours, and you can only connect to it when you let go of this paradigm that somebody else knows better than you. Don't even take my word, right? Like, if I can support you, if I can guide you, if I can even create a counterpoint to your belief and your perspective that makes you contemplate and think and therefore expand, great. But don't blindly listen to me. Don't blindly listen to anyone. Because this is the point of where we're at in history right now, is you cannot, we're coming back to the imprint of who we truly are, the original template, but it cannot be done by someone else telling you who you are. Someone else telling you what choices you should make, what you should believe, what you should think, what side you should be on. what color you should be, the labels, that all needs to be like, scrap it, right? It's all a distraction. It's all an illusion. It's all part of the matrix of separation. And as within, so without, if you're creating that outside of yourself and in society, you're going to do the same thing to yourself inside of yourself, right? We are in our most natural state when we're in a state of love. And, Darius was talking about this, and it's hard. It's really hard when you have to look at everything from the perspective of love, because fear is that which we are not. It's the absence of love. So that means it's that which we are not because we are love. And fear is what brings us into the illusion of separation. It's what brings us out of our spiritual sovereignty. Because it's the only thing that, quote unquote, can control our soul, even though in reality, in theory, it's not in theory, actually, it is in reality, but we just might not have experienced it yet. In reality, nothing owns, controls, or destroys our soul, because it is the very fabric of Source itself, and so it cannot be extinguished. But fear is certainly a good way of being able to control it. And think about it. If that feels too like esoteric and far out, think about your own human experience. That if you're really scared of something, do you feel like you have control over yourself? Like, fear can make you do weird things, right? It can make you reactive and react emotionally in ways that after you're like, shit, I had no control over that. And so that's why we do this work of self-awareness and being with and presence and self-witnessing and cultivating our emotional intelligence. I was going to say human intelligence, which is emotional intelligence to me, and spiritual intelligence, to be honest. I think emotions are a huge and amazing gateway for all of these things. But part of doing this work is that we have, quote unquote, control. And I hate using that word because control is tied up with kind of authority over, and that's not the control I'm talking of here. What I'm speaking to here is that you are, oh God, why does the term master of your own domain come through? It's like knowing that I have a choice how I respond. Knowing that I have a choice because I'm so connected and in tune with myself. And I'm saying I, meaning all of us, that when we're in that state of self-awareness, that we are so in tune and connected with ourselves that we can slow things down enough to make the choice. And so therefore that gives us a sense of control in the highest form of that word. Language is so limiting. My goodness, it's really hard. It's really hard. There's a lot of words that need to be invented, because we have a lot of negative connotations. So we need to redefine at the very least. A lot of re's going on. So it's feeling like engaged is another word that comes through. It's like I'm engaged. I can choose. I have the sovereignty over my body and my being, not in a controlling way, but in a controlled way that there's a mastery. Like what mastery means, like when you can master an instrument or your physical body, it means that you have control over it. So when I was a professional ballet dancer, you had to have mastery over the art form of ballet so that you could control what your body did and didn't do, right? To such a meticulous, perfected way, a little bit too much, but right? Like if you master the piano, you have control of how your fingers move over the keys, right? And how you play the music. And is it soft or is it strong? Is it staccato or is it legato? That is the type of control that I'm speaking of, is that you get to be the conductor and the composer, actually. But you are the conductor. You're not following, but you are leading, or you're in tango with, right? Tango is such a beautiful analogy because there's both the leader and the follower, and they have to be intimately connected in order for it to work. It's the true representation of masculine, feminine, yin, yang, assertive, and receptive, not passive, receptive. So this is like all, can you feel that, like that middle point, that 0 point? Actually, I've been really feeling into this a lot lately, that 0 point of, it's neutrality, but it's because it's in perfect balance and in harmony. Masculine, feminine, physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, left, right, meaning left brain, right brain. Not political. I'm not talking, I'm not going there. That's all a game. Divine, earthly, whatever, night, day. The duality comes into beautiful and perfect alignment and harmony and balance. And that is our true template, and that is home. It's not about being a perfect specimen, but when we're in balance, it's like being the willow in the wind, right? You're not this rigid, old, brittle branch that can break in the wind. You are this beautiful, fluid willow that no matter which way the wind blows, it doesn't mean you get tossed around. It means that you know how to dance with life. You know how to dance with creation. And that is what our original template and our original form and our true self and our home within home is. That is the 0 point, is that everything is possible from there, because we're not in the resistance or the clinging on to. We're in a natural, neutral state where anything and everything can be witnessed, seen, held, heard, loved, embraced, embodied, manifested, right? And we're not there yet because it's a hard place to hold on to. No, hold on to is not the right word. It's a hard place to kind of retain, because it takes so much damn mastery to get out of what we've been so programmed to be in, which is the duality, which is the resistance, which is the fear. The fear has really kept us in what we could call the low self. The low self that is in survival mode. And I don't want to speak for everyone, but like when I speak to the people that I know, but also when I tune in intuitively to the collective, I can really feel that people have had enough. They've had enough with this way of living. They've had enough with the bullshit. They've had enough with the scarcity. They've had enough with being scared and frightened at every corner. They've had enough with just being in survival mode. They've had enough with the mundane and the superficial, and things don't have any meaning, and just, get your 9 to 5 and your paycheck and spend it all on your bills. And, we're moving into these times of, what has meaning to me? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Not that I need to prove anything because I need to be better than who I am, but why did I come here? And what is meaningful for me uniquely, personally, authentically? And how can I be of service? And what do I want to give? And what do I want to experience whilst I'm here? Is it the superficial? Is it the mundane? Is it the meaninglessness? Is it the greed? Is it the division and separation and opinionated form and war? And, I think for a lot of people, they're like, no more. We don't want any more of that. So that's moving from the lower self, where there's nothing wrong with the lower self, but we're outgrowing it. We don't need it anymore. It's been our prison because we have been enslaved. But we can easily relinquish ourselves and liberate ourselves by just choosing to let go of fear and to find the courage through heart to come back to who we originally are. But it means you have to take self-responsibility for your life. You can't hand it over to another authority. But self-responsibility is hugely empowering. It's hugely liberating. Yeah, you got to get your own shit together, but that's great. You can do it. And the tools are there if we tune in and we trust. We've been told to not trust our intuition, not trust our bodies, not trust our own thoughts and our own mind. Like, we've been turned against all parts that are natural. We've been turned against nature itself. Oh, nature is dangerous, right? God, people used to live by the stars, by the wind, by the trees, by the birds, by the animals, by the earth, by the ley lines, by the water. We used to be in connection and in communication with all of these things, and therefore we never felt alone, and we never felt lost because we were continually guided, because we are continually in conversation and communion with all that is. It's in the illusion of separation that was created by fear and control that we forgot these things and we were severed from these things, and therefore we're outside of home. So here's the re-remembering, the reascending, the realigning, the rebalancing, right? We're just coming back home. So how do emotions, what role do emotions play in this reascension, in moving from the lower self to the higher self? Emotions bring us into presence. They bring us out of the construct of the mind and into the feeling body. And if we go further and deeper, into the heart. And the heart is the portal and the gateway to our soul. It's not the mind. Consciousness can rest. Well, I believe consciousness and our soul rests in the heart center. The mind is a tool to express our consciousness, to express our heart and our emotions and our feelings, but it's not the center of the universe by any means. But anyway, it's more about energy centers rather than mind and, whatever, certain organs, right? It's more about energetic centers, but the heart center and that chakra is a huge, huge portal, right? So emotions are messengers, and they invite us to pay closer attention to our experience, to get really refined with how feelings clue us in to our inner selves, not just in human form, our personality, yes, our ego, our fears, our wounds, our triggers, our humanity, our childhood, all of those things. But essentially, when we really go into emotions and into the energy of emotions, we reach the energy and essence of our soul. Because I do believe that there are feelings on the other side, but we don't have the same judgment, and it's not duality, right? So it's a different experience. And the only thing that I could say that I can remotely have an understanding of that in human form is when I can allow myself to feel without judgment. And then you just go, all right, this is a feeling. Okay, this is another experience. Okay, what is this showing me? What is this teaching me? What gift is in this? What is this revealing to me? How do I get to know myself better because of these feelings and emotions? They're not the enemy. They're the portal. They're the pathway, right? They are the pathway to this reascension. Because when you can really fine-tune the language of your emotions and emotional intelligence, you have such a far greater capacity and spectrum to be able to have the human experience, to live the human experience through that, because all of a sudden your level of communication becomes very refined. Your experience of another person, your experience of yourself, your experience of the environment around you becomes much more refined and fine-tuned. You can do much more with it. Like, again, going back to the analogy of music, when you have mastered the piano, you can play exquisite music on it. If you have not mastered the piano, you're stuck playing chopsticks. And after a while, that's going to get pretty boring, right? So it's not about perfection from the perspective of you're not good enough. It's the refinement, because you actually have the most amazing potential to become this exquisite, divine specimen, human being, spiritual soul being, and a work of art, a work of divine art. So the moving from lower self to higher self, if you use the language of emotions as an invitation and as a portal to understand yourself better, to come closer to who you are as a human, into your heart and to the essence of your soul, your infinite self, that's the ascension, the reascension, the re-remembering. So pay attention to your emotions by really listening to them and being curious and inquiring into them. Don't get rid of any of your experiences. They are what make you who you are. Do not get rid of your ego. It makes you who you are. Now, the aspects that we call ego that go into what we call like, oh, he's got such an ego, right? Like vanity, greed, controllingness, like controllingness, I know is not in a word, but meaning like controlling in the way that we spoke about before that has a negative connotation. Narcissism, selfishness, all of the kind of characteristics that we attribute and vilify the ego for, let's not call that ego right now. Let's just put that over to its own side, on its own bench, and just say, well, these are the qualities that often arise from a state of fear, which means it's the lack of love, which means it's that which you are not. And let's not reprimand them, but let's alchemize them. And if at the core root of all of that is fear, then what does fear need? It needs to be loved. Love is the ultimate alchemist. So anything that comes up as what you would call an ugly characteristic, ask yourself, what is underneath that needs my loving attention? Don't blame your ego and say, oh, I want to get rid of my ego and go to the freaking Himalayas for a month to try and rid yourself of it. No. Have a healthy ego that is loving and compassionate and knows how to hold these parts that are a little bit sticky and crunchy and learn to love them and alchemize them into love and into a more evolved version of yourself. If these things are within your character palette or within the character palette of those that might trigger the shit out of you because they're in your family or your partner or your co-workers or people that are in your life, they are on the growth path, in the growth cycle, because those things are here to teach us how to come into greater alignment with love and compassion and empathy, which are parts of our innate being, right? Don't reprimand, don't get rid of. And I think one thing that I really want to drop in that is so important is you are remembering your sense of self. I've talked about the authentic self. I've worked in this arena for more than 15 years now. But when I talk about the authentic self, it's not just who you are as the personality that you are today. My name is Corinne. Your name is whatever your name is. I'm not just talking about that. I am talking about that, but I'm also talking about I understand the essence of the soul that I am. Right? And so this alignment that we're coming into is not just your human self, but your soul self and the integration of that. The veil is becoming thin, so that means it's the integration of the earthly and of the etheric, right? And then recognizing that it's all an expression of the same thing, right? So, the invitation, the invitation is, I am like, the image that comes into my mind is like, put a sticky note on your mirror. And maybe on that sticky note, there's a question that says, who am I? And how do I get to know myself better? Like, I'm curious to get to know more who I am in physical form, in mental form, in emotional form, in etheric form, in spiritual form, in divine form. But what I would encourage you to do is like let go of the dogmas, let go of the Eckhart Tolles that have told you to do this, that, and the other. Let go of the spiritual protocols. Let go of the labels, because as Alan Watts said, the moment you label something, you limit it. You take away the entire spectrum that is around there and that is possible. Going back to what Darius Wright said, we are limited to these five senses and we cannot see the full spectrum of light, which means we cannot see the full spectrum of frequency, which means our reality is very limited and we're living such a tiny, teeny, tiny portion of what could be. You know, they say we've got 12 strands of DNA and, you know, we use 2 and the rest are junk. No, bullshit. No, we just have to reawaken them, right? So the invitation is really super simple. Just ask yourself every day, who am I and how do I get to know myself better? How do I pay attention to myself better so that I get to learn more about who I am? Get interested, get curious. Know that fear and judgment are what keep you out of your own light, that keep you out of your own soul imprint. That's okay. Don't get rid of the fear. Don't get rid of the judgment, but see them for what they are, that which you are not, and alchemize them back into love through love. The only way out is through. There is no getting rid of. There is no severing. There is no erasing. There is no deleting. You cannot erase your past, but you can have a different relationship and perspective, relationship to it and perspective of it, right? But don't delete it because it made you who you are today. And you should be proud of who you are today. And if there's still areas of growth, great, keep growing. Be like a flower, keep growing, but not because you're not good enough. Not because you need to become a more perfect version of yourself. As I've said a million times, and I'll say it another million, we're just coming back to home to who we truly are. So take the invitation if it feels right for you, and just make the intention. Intentions are very powerful to just have a relationship with yourself, just like you would fall in love with someone and want to get to know about them. Do that with and for yourself. And then also know that you're not alone. And I think the more that we come into the true imprint of who we are, the more connected with one another we'll feel, because we'll recognize that even though we have our own unique fingerprint and soul signature, we are all connected and we are all part of the one. We are all part of the unified field. We are all part of consciousness and love and spirit and divine and whatever you want to call it. And we'll feel it more the more that we individuate, meaning the more that we come into our soul self, right? We don't need to be the herd anymore. We can be the ocean, but you have to acknowledge and revere the beautiful, unique droplet that you are. And to recognize that all of the droplets combined create this incredible force of creation. And if we want to change the world, we have to be in that force of creation together. And the way we do it is through love. We can't be separated from ourselves and from one another anymore, and from source itself, right? You put cracks in a bottle and the water goes everywhere and it's a mess, right? We need to become a unified field of love. So begin with yourself. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. And thank you for being here. Sending you love. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.